June 1944, the Normandy shoreline, German-occupied France. Oberfuhrer Hans Richter of the German 12th SS Panzer Corps stood inside his subterranean command center, positioned 18 kilometers from the English Channel. Through his military telephone he detected something impossible, a sound that chilled him to his core, a piercing electronic frequency transmitting through the wire. Enormous formations advancing toward the coastline, the lookout at the northern coastal station had conveyed. Richter was an engineering officer. When the Wehrmacht recalled him in 1942, they stationed him with the 12th SS Panzer Corps for intelligence evaluation. He discovered rapidly that warfare transforms everything. You don't forecast using peacetime assumptions. You forecast using what your adversary has already constructed. The Atlantic Wall, that legendary defensive barrier extending 2,700 kilometers along France's shoreline, had consumed 2 years of his professional life. Through his military telephone, as initial intelligence arrived regarding the advancing formations, Richter grasped something profound. The Germans had constructed a barrier of reinforced concrete. The Allies had countered by constructing something entirely different, something manufactured in sections, something built from modular pieces, something inconceivable. Richter was about to learn that absolute conviction could be warfare's deadliest weapon. Oberfuhrer Hans Richter, 52 years old, had devoted 3 decades to military construction. He had engineered defensive positions in Poland. He had examined fortifications on the Atlantic Wall from Scandinavia to Iberia. He had inspected 47 separate coastal installations and produced comprehensive analyses on every one. His evaluation of Normandy had been exhaustive, quantitative, ruthlessly accurate. The Normandy shoreline was fortified. The supply chain was unworkable. The assault would collapse. He was valued in German military leadership. His analyses were exacting. His computations were confirmed. His findings had never been disputed until this moment. Richter stood inside his tactical chamber, a reinforced bunker 18 kilometers from the shore, and sensed something transform. At 6:15 that dawn, the initial intelligence had arrived. Then more, then additional reports. 5 separate coastal surveillance installations, all transmitting the same inconceivable information. Richter had specifically requested this posting. When reconnaissance indicated unusual developments in British dockyards, Richter offered to investigate. His knowledge was required. They suggested it was likely insignificant. A false report, enemy misdirection, Richter had persisted. If there existed even a remote chance that the Allies had engineered something unprecedented, German leadership required awareness. His commanders had approved his surveillance station. They hadn't anticipated him discovering anything substantial. Richter had been a career military officer for 30 years. He recognized that certain things were mathematically unachievable, not merely challenging. Harbor construction during active combat was unachievable. Manufactured ports were unachievable. Establishing a working logistics network without existing harbors was unachievable. These weren't subjective judgments. They were realities confirmed by generations of warfare experience. But as intelligence continued arriving through the military telephone, as his command personnel assembled around the operations chart, as the data began forming patterns, Richter recognized that absolute conviction could be warfare's deadliest weapon. Because when you became convinced something was unachievable, you abandoned seeking methods to achieve it. And that's how you failed. At 6:15 hours on June 16, 1944, the lookout at the northern coastal station transmitted his initial intelligence. Richter monitored through the military telephone. His command personnel gathered near the operations chart. Enormous formations in the waters, the lookout reported. Classification unknown. Measurements roughly 60 meters by 200 meters. Mass calculated at 6,000 tons, maneuvering with towing vessels. No apparent weaponry. What is his observation? The tactical officer questioned. Richter didn't answer immediately. He was considering, computing, attempting to categorize this within any framework he comprehended. Within 30 minutes, Coastal Station 3 transmitted, numerous formations approaching our zone. Same classification as Northern Station, matching configuration. Being arranged in calculated formation. Distance roughly 15 meters between formations. Richter retrieved his military journal. He sketched what he heard described, documenting measurements, tallying the personnel, noting the timestamp. At 7 a.m., Coastal Station 5 transmitted, "Formations are securing in position. Employing towing vessels." Securing method appears to be 4-anchor configuration, requiring roughly 90 minutes per formation from approach to final securing. Richter closes his journal, checks his timepiece. 32 minutes since initial intelligence. The subsequent formation is positioning into place. Richter performs the mathematics. If they sustain this rate, they'll finish the harbor in fewer than 10 days. Unachievable, but the intelligence keeps arriving. "The adversary is building something," Richter stated calmly. The tactical officer examined the chart. "Building what?" "There's nothing in our projections. That's exactly it. There's nothing present. So he's transporting something with him, something manufactured in sections, something that can be erected on site." The chamber fell silent. Everyone grasped the consequences. If the Allies could construct a harbor, Germany's entire defensive approach was worthless. Over the subsequent 4 hours, Richter obtained intelligence every few minutes from his 5 coastal lookouts. Each transmission contributed another element to a problem that shouldn't be solvable, but it was being solved. At 7:45, Coastal Station 2 transmitted, "Formations have auxiliary platforms connected. Buoyant platforms, ascending and descending with tide levels, appear to be mooring structures." At 8:30, Coastal Station North transmitted, "Further formations being arranged. This one linked to prior formation by metal bridge. Metal bridge buoyant on floats. Accommodates ocean movement." Richter was creating technical drawings now, attempting to picture what his lookouts were describing. Each transmission was technically sound. Each lookout was qualified. Each measurement was exact. But the complete picture was unachievable. The Allies were constructing a manufactured harbor. Not a compromised harbor being restored, a wholly manufactured harbor being erected from modular sections. At 9:45, fresh intelligence arrived that clarified everything. Coastal Station 4 transmitted, "Lookout verifies component uniformity. Every formation matching. Same measurements, same securing locations. Same stability mechanism. This is not custom engineering. This is assembly, industrial assembly." Richter rose from his workstation. He approached the wall chart. He studied the locations indicated by his 5 coastal lookouts. 5 separate locations, 5 separate zones. All transmitting matching observations. This wasn't a single harbor. This was an infrastructure. At 10:30, he obtained a transmission from Coastal Station North. 4th formation arranged. Timing progression. 1st formation 90 minutes. 2nd formation 87 minutes. 3rd formation 85 minutes. 4th formation 84 minutes. Cruise accelerating. Analysis indicates 20 formations daily achievable, if work proceeds without interference. Richter seized paper and started computations. 20 formations daily. 100 complete formations, 5 days minimum. Perhaps 4 if they sustained improvement, but there was additional information. The buoyant pier structures, the variable dock elevations, the floating bridges, the securing mechanisms. This was industrial organization on a magnitude that Germany couldn't replicate. At 12 o'clock, 12 hours into the deployment, Richter convened a command briefing. His reconnaissance officer participated. His supply officer participated. His tactical officer participated. "Gentlemen," Richter stated, "the adversary is building manufactured harbors. 2 of them, 1 American zone, 1 British zone." The reconnaissance officer disagreed. "That's unachievable. There's no intelligence regarding such an operation?" "There's presently," Richter stated. "I'm obtaining direct reports from 5 locations. The adversary is constructing a manufactured harbor in real time, before our lookouts." The supply officer moved closer. "If he finishes this harbor, what's the throughput?" Richter had already computed. "Based on formation measurements and buoyant platform throughput, I calculate roughly 7,000 tons every day, per harbor. 2 harbors equals 14,000 tons every day." The chamber fell silent. The assault approach had relied on logistics failures compelling American withdrawal. But 14,000 tons every day transformed everything. At 14.00, Coastal Station North transmitted the 5th formation in position. The sequence persisted. The Allies understood precisely their actions. They had organized this. They had engineered it. They had produced the sections. And now they were constructing it with industrial accuracy while German leadership attempted to comprehend what was occurring. By 16.00, as the afternoon advanced, Richter had obtained sufficient intelligence to comprehend the complete magnitude. The Allies weren't adapting, they were implementing. A strategy designed months earlier, produced months earlier, being executed now with total certainty that it would succeed. This was the moment Richter grasped something profound. Germany wasn't failing because of battlefield errors. Germany was failing because the adversary had manufacturing capability that German commanders couldn't fathom. At 16.00, Richter sat isolated in his tactical chamber. All 5 coastal surveillance installations had now transmitted numerous formations in position. The intelligence was uniform. The sequence was obvious. The schedule was improving. He retrieved the German strategic evaluation, the document that had directed all fortification planning. Harbor restoration, minimum 3 weeks. Adversary logistics chain? Reliant on seized harbor facilities. Assessment, assault will collapse due to supply breakdown within 2 weeks. He studied that assessment. It had appeared so rational, so mathematically absolute. But it had been worthless from the instant the Mulberry sections departed British dockyards. The adversary had foreseen the challenge, had designed the answer, had produced the sections, and now was installing them under the surveillance of German personnel who could do nothing except observe and transmit. Richter contacted the Corps' leadership. General, I have the evaluation you requested regarding the adversary construction operations. Continue, Oberfuhrer. Sir, the adversary is constructing a manufactured harbor infrastructure, 2 harbors, 1 per zone. Based on formation measurements and buoyant platform specifications, each harbor is capable of offloading roughly 7,000 tons of materials every day. Total throughput, 14,000 tons every day. Construction schedule, 5 to 7 days to functional status, silence, extended silence. General, this indicates the adversary's logistics situation is not limited by harbor accessibility. The adversary has resolved the supply challenge that we projected would stop him. Additional silence. What do you suggest, Oberfuhrer? Richter had considered this during the hours of evaluation. Sir, our fortification approach relies on compelling American withdrawal through supply deprivation. But if the Allies can offload 14,000 tons every day through manufactured harbors, supply deprivation isn't achievable. The mathematics have transformed. The approach is worthless. The general's tone was measured, but Richter detected the tension. Document your evaluation. Complete technical examination. I'll transmit it to Army Group? Yes, sir. Richter disconnected the military telephone. He retrieved his journal and started documenting. The realities were straightforward. The computations were direct. The consequences were catastrophic. Germany had foreseen the challenge accurately. 3 weeks of logistics chain disruption would terminate the assault. But the adversary had designed an answer that rendered 3 weeks meaningless. The adversary had resolved in months what would have required Germany years to resolve. This was the core distinction, not battlefield tactics, not bravery. Manufacturing capability, the capacity to identify a challenge, design an answer, produce sections in volume, and install the infrastructure under hostile fire. Germany couldn't accomplish this. Germany lacked the manufacturing foundation. Germany lacked the organizational facilities. Germany lacked the confidence to attempt the unachievable. Richter performed his computation. 100 Mulberry formations, 6,000 tons each, 600,000 tons combined. That was solely the reinforced concrete phoenixes. Include the pier structures, the floating bridges, the securing mechanisms, the stability apparatus. The complete manufacturing output demanded for Mulberry Harbor surpassed the total yearly steel manufacturing of numerous countries. And the Allies had produced it. while waging a worldwide conflict, while engaging in North Africa, while executing the aerial bombardment operation, while equipping their forces in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. The Allies had still located the capability to produce 600,000 tons of harbor sections. Germany had not. Richter retrieved the manufacturing calculations. American steel manufacturing in 1944 surpassed 15 million tons. German steel manufacturing was decreasing, presently calculated at 8 million tons. The Allies were manufacturing almost double the steel Germany was manufacturing. And the Allies were applying their excess capability for everything: armored vehicles, planes, vessels, ordnance, and now manufactured harbors. Germany was applying its restricted capability for armaments, not facilities. Mulberry Harbor demonstrated American manufacturing certainty. The Allies weren't merely constructing sufficient equipment to prevail in the conflict. They were constructing facilities to sustain deployments on a continental magnitude. They were constructing the logistics infrastructure for a warfare apparatus that would ultimately traverse Europe and overcome Germany. Richter contemplated the preparation demanded. Thousands of seamen prepared to arrange harbor sections. Thousands of technicians prepared to control stability mechanisms. Thousands of laborers prepared to control auxiliary vessels. All of this demanded preparation facilities, preparation duration, preparation installations. Germany couldn't accomplish this. Germany was recruiting conscripts and deploying them to combat with minimal preparation. Germany's preparation infrastructure was disintegrating. The Allies had the advantage of comprehensive preparation. They had the advantage of task specialization. They had the advantage of infrastructure duplication. The Allies could afford to construct 2 Mulberry harbors, 1 American, 1 British, when one might have been adequate. That was the certainty of manufacturing dominance. Richter comprehended that Germany could not accomplish the equivalent, not because the concept was too elaborate, not because the technology was unachievable, because Germany lacked the manufacturing capability. Germany's manufacturing plants were obliterated. The Ruhr was experiencing continuous assault. Steel manufacturing had disintegrated. What manufacturing plants remained were manufacturing armored vehicles, planes, ordnance, the implements of resistance, not the implements of logistics. There was no capability for producing 600,000 tons of harbor sections. This was the core distinction. The Allies had converted a supply challenge into a manufacturing answer. Germany couldn't accomplish the equivalent. The disparity was insurmountable. Richter documented his concluding analysis at 2,200 hours. The command post was still. Most personnel were resting. He sat isolated with a solitary lamp and his journal, laboring from his command station distant from the shore. The Mulberry harbors demonstrate a revolutionary transformation in warfare supply engineering. The infrastructure removes the requirement for specialized harbor construction at the installation location. Any prepared crew can construct a harbor in days employing uniform sections and methods. Strategic consequences? Germany's fortification approach based on demolished bridges is worthless. The adversary can restore crossing capability faster than we can eliminate it. Present fortification schedules based on 3 weeks of harbor restoration are invalid. Actual harbor installation duration: fewer than 10 days to functional status. Battlefield suggestion: redirect fortification assets from harbor elimination to logistics chain resistance. Concentrate artillery and aviation resources on the shore approaches, not the harbor formations themselves. The adversary will restore any harbor we eliminate within days. Our benefit lies in fortifying the landing zone boundary. He endorses the analysis. Understands it will proceed to division leadership, then to corps, then to army group. Each tier will append remarks. Each commander will modify the evaluation to match their own comprehension. By the time it reaches someone who can actually transform approach, it will be delayed. The developments of the subsequent weeks confirmed Richter's evaluation exactly. On June 19th, a tremendous storm attacked the Normandy shore. Waves achieved 10 meters in elevation. The Mulberry harbor, the American harbor, was compromised extensively, portions detached from their anchorages. But the British Mulberry B harbor withstood. And within 3 days, recoverable sections from Mulberry A were incorporated into Mulberry B. The American harbor was restored to limited function by June 22nd. The logistics chain never halted. By July 1st, the Mulberry harbors had offloaded over 300,000 tons of materials. By August 1st, they had offloaded over 400,000 tons. The assault didn't collapse. It didn't decelerate, it strengthened. It advanced from Normandy and pushed toward Germany itself. Richter's forecasts had been accurate. The German command leadership's evaluation had been entirely incorrect. The certainty that had appeared so mathematically firm had been worthless from the instant Mulberry harbor sections started being transported across the English Channel. Richter survived the conflict. After Berlin's surrender, he was questioned by Allied reconnaissance personnel. They questioned him regarding the Mulberry harbors. Did you trust they would succeed? Richter reflected on that June day in 1944, positioned in his command station, reviewing intelligence that appeared unachievable. No, he stated ultimately, I didn't trust it was achievable. But then I observed the intelligence arrive, and I comprehended the Allies didn't require trust it would succeed. They had already produced it, they had already organized it. The sole question was implementation, and implementation for the Allies was assured. The Mulberry harbors persist, even presently. One of the most exceptional engineering accomplishments of World War II, they were not constructed in peacetime. They were not erected over years or generations. They were envisioned, designed, manufactured, moved, and installed in the middle of a worldwide conflict, under persistent danger of adversary engagement on a magnitude that appeared to contradict every principle of what was achievable. By the conclusion of their functional duration, the Mulberry harbors had offloaded over 1 million tons of materials. They had processed thousands of machines, millions of gallons of petroleum, countless millions of ammunition rounds, and the personnel and equipment required to advance from Normandy and push toward Germany itself. But the deeper truth extended beyond engineering accomplishment. It addressed the danger of certainty itself. The German command leadership had been certain. They had evaluated the challenge. They had determined findings, and they had ceased considering. They had concluded that the matter was resolved. This was the snare that captured empires and forces. The instant you become certain that something is unachievable, you abandon seeking methods to achieve it. The Allies didn't have the advantage of certainty. They had a challenge, how to equip an assault force without an existing harbor, and they had to resolve it. So they considered outside the limitations of conventional warfare doctrine. They envisioned something that had never been accomplished previously on this magnitude, and they accomplished it. Meanwhile, the German command leadership was certain, and certainty destroyed them. Richter comprehended this in that instant in 1944. He had been certain. He had evaluated the mathematics. He had determined findings. And he had been demonstrated incorrect by human creativity and manufacturing capability. The Mulberry harbors were evidence that with sufficient resolve, sufficient assets, and sufficient readiness to consider differently, the unachievable becomes not just achievable, but functional. They demonstrated that the greatest adversary of creativity is not doubt, it's certainty. The instant you conclude that something can't be accomplished, you cease attempting to accomplish it. And that's how you fail. The Germans failed because they were certain. The Allies prevailed because they declined to recognize certainty as a limitation.